Let's see, we were back actually in Ephesians chapter 6, the first 4 verses. And we were talking about responsibility of children and we got to there, and we actually got to verse number 4, okay, where it says, for fathers, don't stir up your children in anger, but to bring them up in the training, in the admonition, training and instruction of the Lord. And so part of when Paul's given these instructions to the church at Ephesus, again, this church was built on love. Okay, that was their focus, and they were known throughout all of the region around Turkey and the Mediterranean in that area. They were known because it didn't matter who you were. It didn't matter. It didn't matter where you came from, and you got to remember that a lot of these churches, they were put in very predominant locations. Okay, because when Paul, remember, he was a Roman citizen as well as Jewish, and so being a Roman citizen gave him a lot of liberty to go places that generally a person who was Jewish could not go, and they would end up in trouble. You know, I'm not saying that Paul didn't get in trouble; he got in a lot of trouble in where he was going and teaching. But being a Roman citizen, it gave him liberty to get into some locations, and some of the locations that you'll find, what they were very predominant as far as trade centers. Okay, a lot of them were port cities, and so what would happen is you would get people coming from Asia, Europe, and in the Mediterranean area, also down Egypt and stuff, and they would all come and they would kind of bring all of their goods into this location. Okay, and then they would sell their goods, and when they would sell the goods, they would put them on ships and then disperse them all out along the Roman Empire, because back then Rome controlled a lot of the area. And so what happened was, when Paul would go into this area, started this church, they loved people. So it didn't matter if you came from the east, it didn't matter if you came from the north or the south. You know, they would show people the love of Christ. A lot of these people, you have to remember also, if they worked on ships, they didn't get much money. As a matter of fact, a lot of the people that were on the ships were actually slaves that were working on there because the owner basically owned them and put them on the ship to make sure they got the produce to market, and then also bringing the stuff back to them. So now Paul is talking to the parents. And basically, he's talking to the father here, because if you remember, the father and the mother had different roles in the family. Okay, the father was to give the instructions, and the mother would do the teaching. Okay, and so it's like the father would say, okay, I'm going to give you chores to do. And so the mother would break down what those kids' chores would be. And so she would give them the teaching, for instance, maybe teaching the girl how to sew or cook or do things, okay? And please, I'm not a whatever. I'm a man, but I'm not the words are escaping me. a chauvinist. There we go. Because there were some issues of the way women were treated also, okay? It was not meant as a controlling factor, but it was meant that everybody had a role in the family, and they would fulfill these roles. And so it would bring that family into a completeness, okay? And so the father would do the instruction, the mother would do the teaching. But here it says, fathers, don't stir your children up, but bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. And understanding that a lot of times in today's society, okay, in today's society, a lot of times what you see is the mother will bring the children to church, the father will stay home. And that was not the way it was supposed to be. It was the responsibility of the father to handle this aspect of it. He wasn't to say, hold on, I'm too much of a man. I'm not gonna do this stuff. That's a woman's job to do. No, it was his job to do. And there were certain ways that he was supposed to do it. And here's what happens. And this is where society had come, and maybe not as much as it doesn't. Part of this, when he says, bring them up in the training, in the instruction, don't stir up anger in your children, is sometimes as parents, we can smother our kids and control them. Like for instance, if you have a child, and I see this in a lot of parents who want their kids, like they never got a shot to play athletics. They always played, but they never got it very far. So their dream was, I want to be a major league baseball player or a National Football League player or a soccer player or a basketball player or whatever, but they never made it. So what do? They take their kids and they put their kids through every sports program they can, every sports academy that they can, and basically take that child and build their pipe dream in the child. And the child comes to the point where the child doesn't want to play that sport. Maybe that child wants to be a teacher. Maybe that child wants to be a diesel mechanic. Maybe that child wants to work in a factory or whatever. But the father or the parent says, no, you don't understand. I want you to be. It's like my granddaughter, okay? Her mother is a nurse. Her grandmother's a nurse. Her great-grandmother was a nurse. And it's almost like the expectation is for her to be a nurse. So she's trying. But that you can talk with her and see that's really not her passion. You know, she cheered all through from when she could walk all the way through high school. You know, and cheer competitions all the time on weekends and everything else. And all of a sudden, we asked her, we said, are you going to cheer in college? And she said, absolutely not. You know, and so sometimes what he's saying is here's what you need to do with your children. Don't smother them. Understand that each of our children are different. And maybe the aspirations that they have, you know, you try your best to help lead them in a way. But he says, what you don't want to do is you don't want to excessively control everything they do. I don't know if you've ever been somewhere, used to be, when I was growing up, a child was not to speak in the presence of other adults unless they were told to, or say, okay, you can talk. You know, it's like you would be, the adults would all be there, the kids would all be there, and adults are having a conversation, and you want to say something, and they say, no, you're a kid. You know, kids don't talk in adult conversations. You know, and they'd want to control the child. And what Paul is saying is you don't want to do this. avoid unreasonable discipline. I don't know, for instance, let's say you have a child that has a medical issue, okay? One, for instance, is, they still wet the bed, and they're like 3 or 4. And you've seen, I don't know if you've seen, if you read the newspaper, sometimes the way that some parents will discipline a child, the stove's hot. Here, I'll show you. Put their hand on there, or other issues that are there. And he says, here's what you don't want to do. Discipline should be, and I always hear parents do the 3 count. And after 3, you're going to get disciplined. And the parents who say they know nothing about math do very well with fractions. When they get to 2, it's 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4, 2 80, 2 and 75 150ths or whatever, and because they never want to get the 3. But the thing of it is if you told a child, and this is where we're coming to the next one, which is live what you teach. If you tell a child, if I get the 3, then you're going to be disciplined. When you get the 3, they need to be disciplined. Okay? Because if you're telling the child that this is here is the punishment for disobedience. You need to teach them that when there are rules, and if you break the rules, there are circumstances for breaking those rules. Now, that doesn't mean, I've watched some parents where they'll say, if I get the 3, I'm going to put you in timeout. And so the child's doing something, and so they'll go, 1, 2, 3, okay, timeout. And it really was, they just wanted the child to go away somewhere because the child was getting on their nerves. And they would say, okay, you're going to go to your room and you're going to stay in your room for the rest of the day. It's unreasonable. I don't know about y'all. Well, maybe some of you might like it if somebody told you you got to go to your room for the rest of the day and you can't come out. That might be a blessing for you, instead of an unreasonable discipline. But a child needs to know that at a certain point, when you disobey, there's going to be some discipline. And then you also need to refrain from overprotecting them. I've watched some kids, man, they're 18, 19 years of age, and they decide, I've hit adulthood. I'm 18, the magical number, 18. I'm of legal age now. Well, not legal in all things, but they think they are. They're 18. They're legal. And so what happened was, the parent never ever let them in on some little secrets, and they get out there and they have no clue what to do. They don't know. For instance, I don't know if you can talk to my kids, okay, and they'll tell you that they learned early in life that families sometimes have financial issues. And there were times that we would sit down and our kids were 5, 6, 7, 8 years of age, and they would understand that there were financial restraints sometimes. There were times that maybe you wanted something, but I'm sorry, we can't buy this right now. There are some issues here, and so there's got to be some things. A lot of parents never want to ever teach their kids about financing or about finances. Okay, there was a lady I was watching. She was on the news, and what she would do is she would give her daughter her allowance every week, and I think it was like $5 or something, you know. And what she would do is she would say, okay, I'm giving you $5, but I'm charging you $3.50 in rent for the month. Okay, and so the kid's only 5, okay, and all of this backlash she got was, how in the world could you take and charge your child for living in your house? And she said, here's what I'm teaching my child at an early age, that you will get X amount of money. And in that X amount of money, you can't spend all of that money. There is part of that money that you're going to have to pay for certain things. One being rent. You can't live scot-free all of the time. You're going to have to do this. And what she actually was doing was taking the $3.50 that she was giving to the little girl and putting it in a bank. And when the girl turns 18, the mother's going to give her the money that she's been, accumulating over the years. But she's trying to teach her. And sometimes we overprotect our children, and when they actually get into the real world, they have no clue. They're lost. Okay? And we'll bring this back in a minute to some other things. You need to value each of your children. One of the things that really upset me more than anything was I had an older brother and an older sister. My brother was 7 years older than me, and my sister was 5 years older than me. So I ended up going to the same elementary school that they went to. Okay? And then I ended up going to the same junior high that they went to. And then I ended up going to the same high school that they went to. And guess what? I ended up with some of the same teachers that they had in school. And it was like, they would say, well, you're not like him, or you're not like your older brother or your older sister. And then my brother Rick was just a mess because he came after me, and I was a good student. And he was the one that was, my mom always said that she only went to school one day, and that was in her sister's place until she had to go to school. She spent more time in school with my brother Rick than she ever spent in her whole lifetime going to school for herself. It was like almost every day she was being called to go into the school. You need to come get your son, or you need to talk to your son, or this or whatever. He was terrible. Now you know why he is the way he is today. But one thing that you need to learn is that each and every one of your children are different. They are not the same. I have 3 children, and I could not discipline all 3 of them the same way. My older son, you just said anything to him, he cried. My middle child, my youngest son, you would tell him he's going to get a spanking for something, he says, bring it on. And then after you spank him, he'd say, that didn't hurt. And I mean, you can't beat him, but I mean, he was very determined. Charlie, all she'd have to do is look at you, and you would melt. Okay, with my daughter, and so each of those 3 were totally different. And when my son Tim was born, I was 21. Okay, first child. I had younger brothers and sisters that I had to raise, but I couldn't raise him the same way that I raised them. So it's totally different. Tom comes along 2.5 years later, and he's totally different than Tim. So I got two kids, 2.5 years apart, and all of a sudden they're totally different. And then Charlie comes along, and she's 9 years younger than Tim, and 6.5 years younger than Tom. And she's a girl. And there's no way that I could train that girl or discipline that girl the same way that I did the sons. It just wasn't the same. And I had to learn. Each one of them are different, totally different. Okay? You need to encourage your children rather than discourage your children. Okay? How many times have you ever been in the store somewhere and somebody talking to their kids, you idiot, you dummy, you wait till you get home, wait till your dad gets home, or wait till this, or wait till that. You know, my kids would do things wrong, okay? And what I would try to do is explain to them what they did and why it was wrong. And the encouragement was, let's try and do better. Okay? It didn't always work, because sometimes they'd go back and do the same thing all over again as soon as you turn your back. It's like, okay, I thought we just had this discussion. Well, I did, Dad, but you got to understand, I have a short memory. and I kind of forgot. You also need to keep your promises. If you tell your child you're going to take them somewhere on Friday, you need to make sure you're going to take them there on Friday. The worst thing you can do is tell a child, I'm going to do something and not do it. After a while, they get to the point, you're really not going to do it, so why even tell me? One of the hardest things is when your kids would come home with grades on their report cards. Now everybody, oh, I want my child to have straight A's. You know, I want them to do excellent. I want them to max out and whatever. But sometimes, may I say to you, that not all kids are going to get straight A's. There are some kids that know the subject matter, but they freeze on tests. And then it's like the teacher says, oh, they don't know anything. They just keep flunking. Or, for instance, you have other kids that are like they're geniuses, and their attention span. You're asking them to pay attention in a class, and they're way beyond where you're at. And people think, well, all they're doing is just daydreaming. They're not paying attention. They're way beyond you. And their understanding is great. But sometimes what we need to do is we need to understand where our children's achievements are, and don't always try to push them way beyond their bounds. Because what you're doing is setting them up for failure. And that's not what you want to do. Make each child know that he or she is important to them. Okay? Try never to play favoritisms. I mean, you got two children, you know, treat them equally. One of the things that we tried to do with our kids is, there were times, like for instance, the whole family would go somewhere. But we would always, while our kids were in school, we would always make it, we would make a habit of, my kids, I really didn't care that they had perfect attendance in school, okay? I know I was a bad parent, you know, but there were times that what we did with our kids was, we said, okay, here's what we're going to do, is we're going to set up a day just with you and us. And we're going to give you X amount of money, and you can go anywhere you want, do whatever you want with this money, but when the money runs out, the day's over. And some of them, we only had to spend an hour with, and that was just for breakfast, you know, and the money was gone. Breakfast in the toy store, they're done. A couple others, it was like, man, can't you hurry up and spend this money? We've been out here for 10 hours. You know, it's time to go home. And then let me say this to you, and sometimes this is hard to do. When your children get older and they get married, love their spouses. Sometimes you look at them and you say, that is not who I would have picked for you. Can I tell you that that person that you're marrying is trouble? You know, no. That's who they pick, guys. I mean, how many times did your parents say to you? I mean, I know when Diane and I were dating and wanted to get married, her mom and dad said, no way. There is no way you're going to marry him. He came from the wrong side of the tracks. You know, we know his parents. Their values are different than ours. And it's just going to be nothing but trouble. And 46 years later, we're still here. And we're doing fine. Now, why do I say all of that? Let me share this with you. Remember what we were saying? That in this, there is the natural side of this, and there's also a spiritual side of this. And here's the spiritual side of it with God. God does not smother us or excessively control us as his children. Now, he tells us, and through his Holy Spirit, he will lead, guide, and direct you in a certain way. But God doesn't come up to you and say, okay, here's what's going to happen. You are going to go to this store and you're going to buy this product and it's going to be this price. And that's what you're going to buy and that's what you're going to pay. You know, God doesn't come up to us and say, okay, guys, you need to go shopping today, so I'm going to tell you exactly where to go shopping and exactly what to buy. That's not God. He gives us some freedom, okay? Now, if you're diabetic or if you're allergic to something, God has given you enough common sense that there are certain things you shouldn't eat or else it's going to cause you issues, okay? And I've heard some people do this number. They're allergic to peanuts and they go and buy them stuff that has peanuts in it. And they break out and they say, God, why didn't you tell me not to buy those things? Well, he already did. Well, why didn't you hold my hand away from it? You know, why didn't you just smack me and grab my hand and yank it? You know, God doesn't do that. He does not excessively control us. He gives us freedom to make decisions.
It's like a child. Sometimes you have to let them do it to learn it.
Mm-hmm. And understand what the consequences are. You know, and this is what God does with us. Okay? And this is what I like about this chapter in Ephesians. Most people, all they do is take the natural aspect of it. They never come to the spiritual aspect of this chapter. And this spiritual, the most important part of this is the spiritual aspect of it. Because if we can learn the spiritual aspect of it, we can then take that spiritual aspect and migrate it over into our natural aspect. Because who's teaching us how to be a parent? God is. Who's the best parent? I think God's got a pretty good start on us. You talk about each child being different. We are all not the same. Okay? The other one. Avoid unreasonable discipline. God does, the Bible tells us, it's very plain about this, that he disciplines those he loves. He says, if I don't discipline you, you're not my child. Now, I know growing up, we would hang out with different kids, okay? And there would be like 4 or 5 different families of kids. And we'd all come home from church or go somewhere, and we would all get together. And here's what every parent said: if my child is wrong, and they're acting up in your house, you have my permission to discipline them, right? Well, you could discipline him. But God doesn't give us unreasonable discipline, okay? I mean, what God does is He disciplines us because He loves us. And may I say this to you? God never, ever disciplines us in anger. Because now He does pour out His wrath, okay? And we've seen that in areas, okay? But when God's disciplining us as His children, He's doing it because He loves us and trying to share it. Live what they teach. What can I say? I think God is living everything that He's trying to teach us. I don't think that God is trying to tell us, by the way, I'm not going to do this, but I expect you to behave this way. It just doesn't work. And so when you begin to start looking at what it is that He's starting to tell fathers and parents how to work with their children, He's saying, I'm giving you the best example that I can give you. I'm giving you me. I have my son, Jesus. But not only do I have my son, Jesus, I have every one of you that have been redeemed. You are my children. And so what am I going to do with you? I'm going to show you how to treat your children, because this is the way I'm going to treat you. And He does that. Now, the other thing too is what I like about God is that each and every one of us are absolutely different. None of us are the same. And here's the deal. And this is what I try to tell people, okay? Let's say you have a problem and you were able to work through that problem, okay? Now somebody else comes up and they have the same problem. And you say, oh, okay, I had this problem also. Well, how did you handle it? Well, here's the way I handled it. And they come back and they say, well, boy, that sure didn't work for me. Well, no. God doesn't always give us cookie cutter ways to handle situations. Because, for instance, okay, in your life, every one of you, if I was to ask you, tell me some things that have happened in your life that have made a huge impact on you. Okay? Every one of you could probably share a totally different experience. Now, some of you may hear someone say something about an experience, and you may say, well, okay, like for instance, I lost my dad when I was 21. How many of you all lost your dad when you were kids? You weren't. I mean, 21 is an adult. But how many of you all lost your father or your mother prior to 25? Just one, two, three. Okay. All right. So when did you lose yours, Barb?
In 75, my mom.
Okay. And how old were you?
23.
Okay. And you, Helen?
I lost my dad in 2003 and I was 24.
Okay. 24, 21, 23?
My mom, 24.
At 24? Okay. So all of us are right around the same age. Okay. So if I was to ask you, how did that impact you?
Terrible.
It tore me up.
Okay.
My family mostly, like our family no longer really sees each other anymore.
Okay. The family has just kind of disintegrated because the mother was the one holding the family together. That was the rock. And yours was your mother?
Yeah.
And what about your family?
Not real sure. in one sense, we was glad to see her pass because she was, it turned into an invalid for cancer.
Okay.
So it was kind of a relief that
Right.
she passed on, you know.
Okay, from that aspect. My dad, I was 21. His was a heart attack. You know, but did it impact me a lot? Not a whole lot. I had my wife. You know, I had my son that was with me, and my dad. We really weren't that close. You know, as I was growing up, it was more or less, as I've shared with you. My mom worked, and my dad worked, and basically, my older brother and older sister had already moved out of the house, and I was the youngest, the oldest at that point in time, and I was the one that was raising 4 brothers and sisters. I was the one that was doing the ironing. I was the one that was doing the fixing of the meals, getting everything ready, getting them off to school and everything else. And when I was 18, I was ready to get out. You know, because, hey, if I'm going to run a house, I'm going to get out. And plus I was in love, and so, you know, so it impacts each and every one of us in a different way. Okay, and that's you know, sometimes what we need to understand is that each and every one of us are totally different. We have the same characteristics, but in those, you know, it's our own personalities. Okay, some of you may be introverts, some of you may be extroverts, some of you may be just down the middle. You know, some are easygoing, some have or some have a temper. You know, can have a temper and a heartbeat. You know, there may be certain phrases that somebody says that just brings back a memory that will just set you off. You know, and so each and every one of us are totally different. And so this is what God is saying, that I will treat each and every one of you as an individual. And as I'm doing that, I know how to react with you. Okay? And so what he's trying to tell us is to look also for the similarities and the things that are not similar, the differences in our children. And don't make a big deal out of it. That why aren't you like this, or why aren't you like that? God never made me like them. God made me totally different. Grew up in the same family. You could have 25 kids born in the same family, and they could all turn out to be 25 different kids. They may have some similar traits, and you would think, how in the world did they turn out this way? Well, you think about it. There's only like 10 of us in here tonight. And if we're all children of God, we are not the same. We're different. We don't even look the same, you know. And some of you are saying amen. Praise the Lord. You know, because you would kind of look weird with the white on your face, like Kevin. But the other thing is in encouraging your children, not discouraging. One of the things that I try to tell Christians, and this is the hardest thing for new Christians especially to learn, and that is this: you are going to sin. And sometimes those sins are going to take you places where you don't want to go. Sometimes they may keep you in places where you don't want to be. And what happens a lot of time is this, because a lot of people will teach you that God is angry with you. He's going to get even with you for what you're doing. There's two mindsets. One is that God has this big white board up in heaven that has your name on it. And it has things you've done wrong and things you do right. And God, every second of the day, is keeping track and putting a tick mark on there for every time you do something wrong. And every time you do something right, you got another. And so at the end of the day, what God's going to do is he's going to count up all of the tick marks and say, oh, you're coming to heaven because you got more good tick marks than you have bad tick marks. Or they think that what God's going to do, and the problem is sometimes is because we tell them that God's our Father, and they're trying, and the only thing they can relate to is the Father they had here on this earth. And sometimes that relationship that they had with their Father here on this earth was not always good. And so they're relating God to that, and that is hard to get over that mindset, thinking that, okay, every time I did something wrong, my Father yelled at me. I've shared with you one of the things about my dad was my dad had a temper. And my dad would never discipline you until he got angry. And when he would discipline you, it was going to hurt you in some fashion, way, And that was the one thing that I did not agree with my dad. And I said when I had kids, I would never, ever whip my kids when I was mad at them. If they did anything to make me angry, wasn't touching them. I was not going to touch them until I got away, got my composure, and then we would come back and we would hand out the discipline. I didn't always manage that one, okay? But I think I managed it over 90% of the time. And I think if you ask my kids, I think my kids would tell you that, yeah, he disciplined me, but, I don't think he hurt me in any way, fashion, or form. And so when we looked at it, we need to do that. The other aspect of God is the one thing that I really like about him is if he promises me something, I'll guarantee you I'm getting it.
Amen.
He will always fulfill his promises. And that is why I love him so much. The times when I've blown it, and I know I blew it, and I would have to sit down with a heart-to-heart talk and tell him, I blew it. I am so sorry. I disobeyed you. There's never one time that he's ever come back and said, get out of my face. I don't want to hear it. You've done this before. It's the same old thing. He never does. The great thing that I know about my God, my Father, is that if I come to him broken, he will always hold me. He will never turn me away. He always lets me know he loves me. Always lets me know he loves me. And that's why I just can't imagine a life without him. I can't imagine where would I be. What would I have accomplished in life, without him? I am who I am because he's made me this way. Now, he's still messing with some rough edges that need to be whittled away. I'm not perfect yet there. One thing that he also knows is that God knows each and every one of you. Okay? And God knows right now what your limits are. Okay? Now, if you remember, I did a sermon a while back about people will tell you, and I've had people, good meaning people, and good Christian people, you're going through a difficult time, and they would always come up to me and they would make this statement: always remember, God will never put more on you that you can bear. And then after I really got researching in the scripture, that is absolutely wrong. Because if I can accomplish everything within myself, I don't need God. There are going to be times, ladies and gentlemen, that you're going to hit something, that you're going to sit there and you're going to cry out to God, why? Why is this happening to me? And it's okay to ask him why, because he wants to give you the answer. And the answer sometimes is, well, why not? Paul says, I count it a blessing. I count it a blessing to face the same thing that Jesus faced. James, Mark read it this morning, James 1, 14 and 15, where it basically says that we are to count all afflictions as a blessing from God. I don't know about y'all, that's hard. If I'm going for something, it's hard sometimes. Little things, no problem. But you hit a major roadblock, and to turn around and say, okay, God, this is a blessing, thank you. It's like, people want to know, are you nuts? What are you on? I know you like Coca-Cola, but what are you putting in that Coke? Because you're crazy. Who would want to enjoy this? Well, the one thing that I have learned, and that is this, that Satan cannot do anything to me without God's permission. Okay? He's got to get permission from God first to be able to do anything to me. So, number 2 is, if Satan is bothering me, then I must be a child of God. Why would he bother a child of his and bring them to misery? But there are afflictions that will hit everyone, okay? And it doesn't matter. So let's talk about training our children when he's talking about this. So what does it mean by training a child? Teaching in what capacity? Teaching in what capacity? There is some development when you're training a child, okay? There's basically 2 types of, or actually three types of development when you're training a child. Go to Matthew chapter 22. Verses 37 through 39. I would tell you what page it's on, but your Bible's not like my Bible, so. Somebody got it?
Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself.
Okay, so the first type of development that you are to teach a child is morals. Okay? And can I say this to you? You can teach your children morality in just 2 things. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart What did he say? He says, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and with your mind, your whole being. If you teach a child to love God completely, with the essence of who you are, everything about you, that child will grow up. The second is to love your neighbor as yourself. Now that's hard, because remember the question that came about, and they asked him, they said, okay, who's my neighbor? Is my neighbor the person that lives right next door to me? Or remember the slogan for State Farm? State Farm's your good neighbor. You know, that was their slogan in theirs. Your neighbor is anybody you meet. Now, there are some people that probably have been in your life that have mistreated you, talked bad about you, kind of desecrated your everything about you, and they have become your enemy. But the Bible says that we're to love our enemies. See, also, that's hard. But he says, if you really want to learn how to train up your child, you've got to learn them that it doesn't matter who they are. He says, so love your neighbor. Now, does that mean if my neighbor is over here cussing me out all the time, that I got to love him? Yes. I don't have to like what they're doing, okay? I don't have to like the personality of the individual, but I've got to learn to love the individual. I have to learn to separate the action of the individual from the individual. And sometimes that is hard. Real hard. When somebody's done something to you, there is this face that you just can't forget that's always there. And it's hard to differentiate the two between. Okay. The second one is with your child also, in training them up, there is also some mental development that you also have to help with your child. Okay. For instance, when you had a baby, if you ever did, or if you ever been around a baby, a newborn baby, and or let's do this. Let's say my wife and I just had a newborn baby. She's out of the hospital, and you decided you're going to invite me over to your house, and we're going to have hamburgers and fries. Okay, so we sit down to eat the hamburgers and fries. Are you going to feed that child a hamburger and fries? No. Mentally, their mind is not set up to teach them how to chew that hamburger. So mentally, there's some development there that's got to happen. Okay? That brain's got to be able to learn how to help that, teach those teeth and that jaw how to act together. So there's that mental. Your child, when they're first born, and you're going to give them a bottle, okay, and it's in the middle of the night, and you're in a good sleep. You don't just take and go fix that bottle and say, "Here, kid, you're on your own." Mentally, the child doesn't know how to hold that bottle yet. Now, mentally, that child already knows the action of sucking, and they've learned coming out. Here we go. They learned that, and so they can do that. They can suck on the nipple of the bottle or whatever, to get the nourishment that they need out of the milk or formula or whatever that you're feeding them. And then after a while, you start breaking them in, to the strained stuff that looks like you've taken green beans and put them in a food processor, and they turned out the green liquid, and it's like you feed that to your child, but there ain't no way you would eat that stuff, you know. But that's how they learn to eat it, and then after a while, then they'll move on up. And so there's mentally you're teaching your child how to walk, how to get their legs and their knees and their feet positioned and stuff, to be able to stand and to be able to move and keep their balance and going forward. So in a mental development, you're doing this with a child. And this is what the Bible says, to train your children. That's that aspect of it also, okay? That's there. So we've done the moral part and the mental part, and then go to Proverbs chapter 22 and verse number 6. And this one is coming from Solomon, giving you some word of advice in developing a child.
Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it.
Okay, bring up a child in the way that they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. Now, we always talk about, and we always use this scripture in a spiritual aspect, okay? But let's go away from the spiritual aspect, and let's go into another aspect, okay? If you had children and they had, maybe they were the older child, and then they had younger siblings, did you ever let them help around the other kids? Like learning how to feed or how to just play with them or whatever? Okay. Do you know why you do that? Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart. So when that child has children, guess what? It comes back to them.
Pre-trained.
Yes, you are. Remember the illustration that I used in the sermon last week? There was a lady who had a dog, and the dog was pregnant and was going to deliver within about a week. Was out in the yard and got hit by the lawnmower, and the lawnmower hit the rear end of the dog. They took the dog to the vet, and the vet says, well, she's about ready to deliver, but not quite yet. Now we can go ahead and we can go ahead and take the puppies, or I can sew her back up and let her go ahead, because she will be capable of delivering the children. And so they decided, okay, go ahead, sew her up, and let her have the children naturally. And remember that she began to learn how to walk and how to get around. She would take her front paws, and then she would then take her back and kind of flip it and go forward. Get there, flip, and go forward. And she had the puppies. The puppies were absolutely healthy. And they found out that how the puppies learned how to walk? Same way, from the mother. They would put their paws out in the front, and even though they had their back legs, they would take their rear end and they would kind of flip it and bring it, flip it and bring it, because this is what they learned from their mother. And they thought, that's okay, so that's the way that evidently we walk. And that's what he's trying to say. We always use it in a scriptural point, But I think you can also use it in a physical point, that we also owe it to our children to develop them personally. If you take a child and never ever give them anything to do around the house, and all of a sudden they get married, and the first thing they know is that I've ran out of clothes in my closet. I've got to do laundry. And so they assume, here's what I can do. I've got this washing detergent or powder or pods or whatever else I'm going to use to do that. Oh, and there's this other thing called Clorox that will get out stains. And I've got some, I got some Skyline chili on my real nice blue dress or blue shirt, and this is supposed to get out stains, so I can do that. And I've got some white T-shirts. I've got some really nice pink towels or blue towels or whatever. And so I'm going to do the laundry, and so I'm going to take all of it in there together. It's better to do it in hot water to get out all the stains. So I'm going to do hot water. I'm going to do Clorox, and this says to use just a lid full of this, but I've got a whole bunch of clothes, and I've got it packed, so I really need to get a whole bunch of that. So I'm pouring in all of it that I can. And oh, by the way, when do I add the fabric, softener in? Oh, add it all together. Okay, fine. So you push it all in there together. It comes out, and you throw it in the dryer. Well, what do I sit it on? Oh, well, if I set it on the highest heat, then that'll be great, and then I can get it out quicker. So I put it on the highest heat. Okay, so now I'm going to get it out of the dryer. It no longer fits, and I've got to buy a whole new wardrobe because my blue shirt is now pink. There's this nice spots all over it, and I tie-dyed everything. Why? I was never, ever taught how to do that. I was never taught how to do laundry, how to separate the whites and the colors. And then not only how to separate the stuff into different colors and stuff, but also different fabrics. I can't put, some of the new stuff in with the towels and put it on heat. Some of the new stuff does not go with cottons. Okay, it just flat out doesn't. Okay, so now these no wrinkle outfits that says that you don't have to iron them, they come out all wrinkled every which way because you threw them all in there together. So how am I supposed to get the wrinkles out? Oh, I know. There's a thing called an iron. Well, there's some things you can iron, and there are some things you can't iron. You could, and then what's the temperature that you put the iron on? And what do I use underneath there? How do I do this? If your child doesn't know, they're lost. If we don't teach our children how to balance a checkbook, what do? I pull out my card, I go to the bank, and the bank says I got $100 in there. Guess what I'm doing? I'm taking my $100 out. But I wrote a check for $150 yesterday. And then the next thing I know, I'm paying overdraft fees left and right. And by the time my next check gets into the bank, I have no money. And I spend it because no longer is the overdraft fees $5 or $10. They're now $37. And do you understand that that's where the banks make their most profits, is on the fees off of people? They love you to overdraft. That's their great thing, man. They don't care how much you're $370 in the hole. But this is what he's saying, to also the responsibility of training up a child in the way that they should go, and developing them personally also. Because if you give them that training, once they are old, they will not depart. Guess what? They've got a foundation on which to build. And so many times what we fail to realize is that the Bible is more than just teaching us spiritual stuff. It's teaching us how to get through life. Not just spiritually, but physically, naturally. Okay? All right. I'll do this, and then I'm going to finish, even though it's early. Okay? Because I've talked long enough. He says that you need to do this by teaching in instructions. Okay? In instructions is this. Have you ever bought something and it came in pieces? And it came with what?
Instruction.
Oh, it came with an instruction manual. Okay. How many how many of you all have taken the instruction manual, set it aside and looked at the picture and said, okay, I'm going to put this thing together? Huh? And you get there and you look at it and you have completed the picture. It looks exactly the way the picture is on the box. But you got 28 pieces left and you have no idea where they go. Because the problem was you couldn't see the 28 pieces which go on the inside to hold the thing together. And so guess what? The instruction manual is there to correct you when you're wrong. When you may look at it and say, well, this piece looks like it goes there. I don't know about y'all, but I have messed up so bad on some things because I've got two pieces that look exactly the same. The problem is one goes on the left side and one goes on the right. And it was marked that way. Except I forgot how to read.
It don't matter at Walmart, most of the time, we put it together exactly how it said, and we got 2 shelves, not 3 shelf thing with all, and used all the pieces.
It is, and it's like, they'll put on there, that this, I'll give you a lifetime warranty. Well, the lifetime warranty doesn't include the mistakes that we make when we're putting it together. And when we begin to start talking about instructions, that means that when a child is wrong, they need to be corrected. Okay? Which, again, who's in charge of the instructions? Yeah, God or the Father is in charge of the instructions. So who does the disciplining? Who should do the disciplining? Huh? The Father should. The Father is in charge of the instructions. The mother is in charge of the teaching. But even in the home that I grew up, my mom was the one that basically did the disciplining. And we made fun of her. We could outrun her. Our fun was towards the end. Remember those Hot Wheel tracks? Mm-hmm. Well, at first it was go get a switch, right? You remember those days? Yeah. And you had to go get your own switch. And you found out that what you want to do is when you go to the bush or where you're going to go get the switch, make sure you get a dead limb. You do not want to get a limb that is alive. Because a limb that is alive bends, it has some give in it, and it hurts. A dead limb, as soon as it hits you, it breaks. Well, they found out that we learned. And so my brothers and them bought us Hot Wheel sets when those cars came out. And my mom liked to use those things. Those things stung. I mean, they stung. And so, honestly, this is what we did. We lived in Hamilton, and the houses were probably from here to the wall. That was your yard. Okay? which was great if you had to mow the grass. It was awesome. That's all the grass you had to mow, right? So that's how far it was. Okay, it was like about this far. So if our mom said she was going to discipline us or whip us with Hot Wheel tracks, we would run outside screaming and hollering and yelling. Don't beat me anymore! She's going to kill me! You know, and the neighbors would all come out. And what they would see was the funniest thing that you would ever see, is you would see a grown woman chasing her kids around the house, in the yard, with a Hot Wheel track. The thing of it was that we forgot was we eventually had to come home. Because we eventually got hungry. Because the neighbors weren't always going to feed us. And Mom would always be there. And the only thing we would hope is that she had forgotten. Now, she did sometimes, but not always, okay? But yet, she was the disciplinarian, you know, and it wasn't always the best of things. But when a child does something wrong, you need to sit down with them and tell them why it's wrong and how to do it right. Okay? If a child, you know, broke a window, okay, what happened? Well, we were playing catch. Okay, that's good. I threw the ball and he moved in front of the window. Okay, so what's wrong with that? If you're playing catch, you stay away from the window. You make sure you don't, or if they move in front of something that's going to do some damage, you don't throw the ball to them until they move. And so you explain to them, you know, what they're doing wrong. And then when a child does something right, give them some affirmation. Tell them, you know, hey, that's awesome. You know, when your child puts something together, or they color a picture, you know, to you it may not be the best thing in the world, but to them, that's awesome. You know, tell them, hey, you know, that's great. I know a lot of times we do this. What is it? Oh, that's a great looking bird. That's not a bird, that's a frog. You know, and so explain, you know, and stuff. But when a child's doing something right, like you tell them after you're finished with something, put it up. And they surprise you when you go into the room and you look. Have you played with your toys today? Oh, yeah, I've been playing all day. And they aren't on the floor? Awesome. You know, this is great. You know, thanks for picking those up. You know how much time you saved me? It was great that you did that. I'm glad you did. And you give them that nice little pat on the back. May I say this to you? God does that to us all the time. He gives us the blessings and stuff with the little pat on the back that says, hey, you got it. You got it, and it's right. And then what you need to find, I don't know if you ever take your kids or did, but we've been doing this too. We've been taking our kids to the aquariums and other places. And out of all of these places, you can find teachable moments with your kids. You could even take your kids to the park and watch how some of the other kids act. And you can use that as a teachable moment to your children, as this is not what you should be doing. And if you can ever see those seizable moments, for instance, a great one, I saw this one on Facebook or YouTube, but a lot of times now they have automatic doors, but sometimes you go into a store where you actually have to hold the door, or restaurants are very good for this, is holding the door. How many times have you seen this? There is a woman and a man, a couple, and there's another couple behind them. The guy goes up, he holds the door for his wife to go through, and then he goes through.
Yeah.
And if you guys catch, I'll swing the door, and if you catch it, good. If you don't, you're on your own to catch, to open the door yourself. You got a kid with you, one of your children. A teachable moment is to sit there and hold that door, step to the side, and let your child stay with you, and let the other people go in. A teachable moment is, hey, it's okay. We'll get in there to eat. It doesn't matter that we got in 5 seconds ahead of that other person. A teachable moment says, especially if they're elderly couple, hold the door for them. Respect them. I know sometimes some teachable moments that I've seen that people are teaching is, I always taught my kids that when you saw the flag, you stood up for the flag. You respected the flag, and I've seen some of these things now where fathers and mothers are teaching their kids to spit on the flag, step on the flag, curse the flag, and they're teaching this. You've seen it in the take a knee in the football league, the NFL, where the national anthem is Star Spangled Banner is played, and they're all taking a knee. And you've seen Pee-wee football coaches now have gotten their kids taking a knee, when they're playing this, the national anthem on the speakers, high school and stuff. And to me, we're teaching our kids a culture of disrespect. And we wonder why the kids don't respect each other. They learn that from their parents, and they're. So what we need to do is, if we see a teachable moment, seize it and use it. And if you don't have kids, I'll pick somebody else's kids up. Ask them, can I borrow your kids? I just need some teachable moments for a while, If you do that, God bless you. Hello, this is Pastor Chuck Cotton from Calvary Baptist Church. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time out to either listen to our sermon or to watch it on video. We are grateful that you've actually taken the time, and hope and pray that it has been a blessing to you as it was to us as we delivered it to our congregation. We ask if you have any questions whatsoever that you email us at pastorchuck@calvarybaptistmiddletown.org, or you could come in and give us a phone call, if you would please, at area code 513-423-7251. I'd like to take this opportunity to also invite you to come to our church and visit us, if you would please. We actually have small groups on Sunday morning starting at 9:30, with our morning worship following at 10:45. Prior to our morning small groups, we also provide donuts with coffee, milk, orange juice, a time for fellowship, get to know each other, have a good time before we actually break out into our small groups for Sunday. Our worship services are uplifting, they're fast moving, and everything in our service is just a fast pace. But we do take time every once in a while to slow down as we feel the Holy Spirit moving, and we never want to hinder it in any way. We also have on Sunday evening, during the school year, we have Awana, and Awana starts with a Puggles, actually from age 2 all the way up through high school. And during that period of time, we also have a worship service. Both of these start at 6 o'clock and end at 7:30. Our Wednesday night, we have a Bible study, which starts at 7. We generally finish about 8:15. We would love for you to come and visit with us. Don't have to dress up. Just come as you are, because to us, it doesn't matter. You're a child of God, a creation of His, and so to us, you're important to everything that we do. Our motto here is building the kingdom one life at a time, and we hope that we have a chance to visit with you, get to know you as you get to know us. So thank you, and may God bless you.